Welcome to the Independent Thinking Show for Fifth Wrist Radio. This is a place dedicated to showcasing the great people doing interesting things in the world of horology. My name is Roman, and today I'm joined by a previous guest of the podcast who's now a co-host with me, Mr. Nick Kenyon. Hey, Nick, how are you?
Good, Roman. How you going?
Thanks for coming on board as a co-host for this sort of all-Australian show we've got planned. It's very exciting.
I know. What a treat.
We've got a very cool guest joining us today. He's an independent watchmaker working in Australia. I mean, how many people can lay claim to that? Please welcome to the show, Mr. Reuben Schoots. G'day, Reuben.
G'day, Roman. G'day, Nick.
So nice to say g'day on a show, on a watchmaking show. So nice. I mean, how often do we actually get to do that? That's very, very cool. Alrighty, well, shall we do a bit of a location check just to prove that we're all in Australia? So I'm in Melbourne. Reuben, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from Canberra today, the capital.
Australia's most exciting city.
Second after Adelaide.
Oh, good call. Good call. Hello to our listeners in Adelaide, all two of them, and the parliamentarians joining us from Canberra. Look, very, very exciting. We've got really cool stuff to talk to Reuben about. I'm really, really excited to talk to Reuben because, yeah, it's so cool to have an independent watchmaker doing some really, really cool stuff in Australia. So let's get some wrist checks and drinks checks out of the way, and then we can dive right in. Nick, what are you drinking? What's on your wrist?
So I've got a Negroni in my hand, and I'm actually wearing the new the Time and Tide Bamford collaboration watch that was launched recently.
Very cool. Which serial number did you get, or you're not at liberty to just discuss?
I got 03 somehow. Andrew was extremely kind to let me somehow get a step on the podium. So yeah, very very lucky to get that one.
It's very cool. No, it's a nice looking piece. Yeah. You guys did really well.
Yeah, thank you. No, it looks great. It's it comes on a sailcloth strap as well as a bracelet, and I just moved it over to the bracelet, and it is very, very nice. It's I don't own any other black watches, but it's exceptionally cool.
Very nice. What about you, Reuben? I'm always curious to hear what watch and clockmakers wear on their wrists. Do tell.
I've got my Seiko Alpinist on my wrist.
Nice.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm a one watch man actually.
That's super cool.
Very, very nice. And anything in the cup, mug, vase, or thermos?
I've got a mug, and in the mug is a whiskey.
Nice. What are we talking?
Now that's Fifth Radio style.
No one can see, so it's all good. It's a Balvenie.
Beautiful.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, whiskey does seem to feature a lot in watchmakers. That does seem to be the drink that a lot of watchmakers drink. I wonder if it's just the profession drives you to it, maybe.
TikTok.
The daily frustrations. Very cool.
And what's in your hand? What's in your hand and wrist, Roman?
So I've got my traditional gin and tonic. That's sort of my drink for the podcast. I'm on what sort of gin? I'm on Four Pillars gin again, which is nice. Nice. Sort of keep it nice and Aussie for the recording. And on the wrist, I've got probably one of my most recent watches. I got my Calibrica design indicator watch that was made for me in Russia by Sergei Volkov, who's a nice indie watchmaker. A couple of us in Fifth Wrist family got the indicator watches, and they're very nice. And those guys do some very cool stuff. A lot of stuff in house. I mean, they don't make the movements. They use sort of vintage polyot movements that they refurb. They're kind of military grade polyot movements, but they kind of do titanium cases, hands, dials, even rubber gaskets they make in house. So there's a lot of sort of handicraft in that watch. Wow. Plus, they made us some really cool custom case backs. So Alex, the watch regulator, and I got some cool custom case backs, which is very cool. Yeah, it's just been a really lovely process. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Excellent. Well, Reuben, I think the best way for us to kick off is maybe tell us a little bit about yourself to our listeners, and then we could dive right in. So give us a bit of a bio.
Sure. I'm I'm an independent watchmaker living here in Australia, and I've been spending the best part of the last 3 years making a George Daniels tourbillon watch, following his method as in his book Watchmaking. I'm 27 years old, and I was turned on to watchmaking after a series of illness, and yeah, here I am.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in that sentence.
Absolutely, yeah.
um, let's start with, I mean, you're 27, which is disgustingly young to be doing all the things you're doing. So that's annoying already, but very inspiring at the same time. Let's just backtrack a little bit. So, what sort of career aspirations or what direction were you moving towards before illness interrupted that?
Well, before I was ill, I was working in IT engineering, systems engineering, that sort of a thing. But I had
Hmm.
a few startup businesses as well. I had when Uber Eats came to Canberra, my partner and I started a Mexican takeaway restaurant, and I had my
Oh
hands
wow.
pretty deep into the specialty coffee scene as well.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. But manufacturing, kind of making mechanical things with your hands, was not really in the picture. Is that right?
Not on a professional level, no.
What about a kind of, as a kid, did you play with the Meccano or Lego or, obviously where all watchmakers start?
Yeah, that's a funny you bring that up. Actually, we've just moved house over the last week or two, and I was helping mum and dad move all their things, and the as we recently moved back in with my parents about 18 months ago, and I went through my childhood bedroom, which when I moved out originally some 7 or 8 years ago, I never did the deed of clearing that out, and yeah, I went through all my old things, and there was 4 or 5 boxes full of Meccano and full of little things that I'd made. There was one little thing that I made when I was in school. I think I was in year 4. I made a solar powered remote control car,
Wow.
which was a really cool project that I worked on with my father. So I was just been revisiting these things that I hadn't seen, in the last 15, 16, 17 years. Um, so yeah, I started with those sorts of things and loved my Lego, loved my Meccano. And then as a young boy, I was fortunate enough to go through the restoration process of a 1961 Triumph TR4 with my father.
Cool.
It was a full ground up restoration, and that was really a period of magic for me because that was my real introduction into real mechanics and real engineering.
So is your father sort of a real hands-on, can fix anything, can strip anything down, put everything together kind of guy?
Absolutely, yeah, he's
Right.
super hands on, very practical, very engineering based, as was his father.
Yeah, wow. My father was similar, but I don't think I ever caught the gene somehow.
Yeah, it's really, yeah. I mean, I find the reason I'm sort of asking is, I'm sort of keen to sort of understand where the genesis of kind of, watchmaking in people starts, because I must confess, it's really far away from my own skill set. Like I can barely hang a picture, let alone, or, I could barely follow an instruction, a Lego instruction with my 7-year-old, and he often does it faster than I can. So I'm really fascinated by people who sort of have that, innate ability. And I always sort of think to myself, is that sort of really innate, or whether it's a learned kind of thing, spatial awareness and mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So then let's proceed along the way. So then you got really unwell, and you don't need to talk about that unless you want to. How at what age did you sort of have that major interruption to your life? Let's call it that.
Was between the years of 22 and 24.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
um,
Which are sort of formative years, yeah.
yeah, most certainly. I was on a different track in life beforehand, and as I said, I was working in systems IT uh, stuff, and I was managing a rock and roll band, and that was sort of the two things that kept me busy.
Wow.
Um, and then that all just sort of evaporated, and it was a really difficult time for me. Just being young, capable, fit, healthy. The world was sort of my oyster, and then the next minute it was sort of I you know I was too young to feel so old. That's how I felt, and
Yeah,
um, yeah, chronic fatigue set in, and life changed dramatically for me.
that's very hard.
So then, in amongst that pretty low point, what as hearing you describe it, I can sort of hear the octave of your voice drop. In that low point, how did you discover watches or watchmaking? How did that kind of appear on your horizon, and you thought, oh, that's something I should do or try?
Well, growing up, my parents have quite a large collection of antique clocks. So clocks were always there. Horology was always there, and it was in a time of soul searching, and really just trying to get a grip on this reality that I had. And as I started to improve my health, I started to look for new interests. I had all of this spare time. I wasn't working, wasn't studying, wasn't socializing. It was like every day was literally a blank slate. And the goal of every day was just like eat your food, get some sun, get some sleep. Like that would be a good day. And then as
Wow.
things started to come in more and more, I started to just explore all sorts of different things, and it became unknowingly at the time, it was a gifted moment, because it was just this huge amount of time to take a break and to think. And my I'd always had cars that I would play with and tinker with, mainly with the goal of making them go as fast as possible. Um, and I couldn't really do that with the illness that I had. And a good friend of mine is an engineer. He came around and he was wearing a mechanical watch, and the conversation opened, and we just started talking about the engineering aspects of mechanical movements, of both in awe of how are these things made, who works with them. Just this, as I'm sure you both went down the same rabbit hole when you first discover the wonderful world of watches, and particularly the beautiful and wholesome world of mechanical watches. And it sort of unraveled from there. The questions started, who works with these? How are they made? And they were questions for me, and always have been questions for me, with anything that I come across, any physical, tangible thing. I need to know where it's come from and how it was made. So
Wow.
that's where the journey sort of began.
Does your friend take credit for the path that you're currently on?
Sure, it does.
No. And with the kind of discussion that you were having about watches, was it anything specific, or it was just kind of I can't believe that these things exist?
I think it was just, having always worked on cars as a mechanical thing, and you've got a gearbox, which is a train of wheels that's similar to a watch train, and just seeing the scale for me was it really just inspired awe. It was like, how are these things so small, and then how has somebody ever made this? And then to discover that someone or people in the past had made these things with their hands, that just for me just populated millions of questions. Yeah, it just the scale, that was really the big thing that set me off.
Yeah, wow.
I can imagine lots of people listening to you describing that moment of becoming aware of these things as as a world of their own, and I certainly can relate to that. Going, my God, this is amazing. There's so many wheels, gears. Somebody had to make it. How to make it? Now you went kind of the next leap forward. You went like, I want to find out more, and I want to do this. Now, Australia is not renowned as a hotbed of horological development, so how did you then do the next step of going, well, I want to find out how this works, to I want to know how to make it. How do I learn to make it?
That's a great question. It was an interesting sequence of events. The first thing I did was I told my parents, and my partner, that they had this this crazy idea. It came to me on it was New Year's Eve. The idea was, I was laying in bed, and I honestly felt like something struck me out of the sky, and I had this clear vision that, oh, I'm going to make a watch. And it seemed like I sort of got a brief moment to see a future that was recuperated, a future that was bright. So that was a really beautiful moment. And so the first thing I did was I ordered some old pocket watches off eBay, and I
Mm-hmm.
ordered a watch with an ETA movement in it, and I found some online courses and quickly had at it. And so I was, trying to learn how to take them apart and service them and put them back together and hope that they'd tell the time again. And I did that over a period of about a week, and I did it 4 or 5 times, and I was bored. So I thought,
Wow.
how do I make one of these things? Like, what's the deal? Who makes them? And that's where George Daniels popped up, and I ordered his book, Watchmaking. When it arrived, I read it cover to cover. Then I think I understood 5 or 10% of the book, so I read it cover to cover again, and I think I understood another 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hobbled together a little list of tools and machinery that I thought that I would need to begin making the watch.
Now, when you say begin making the watch you decided to make is not really the beginner's introduction to making a watch, is it?
Well, yes and no. But yes, because there's a book that at least mostly tells you how to make the watch, and no, because it is a masterpiece of a master watchmaker, and it's also got a retrograde hour complication and a tourbillon carriage. So it's not a simple movement, that's for sure.
Wow.
Now, I can think of entire segments of the watch industry of companies that haven't managed to, multiple companies that haven't managed to make a watch like that, of that complexity, let alone finishing. Like we're not even talking about finishing. We're talking about just the mechanism and the complexity. There are industries out there of companies that don't make a watch like you want to make. So, how sure were you that A, you were going to do this, and B, that's going to be your first step into making a watch? Like, was it kind of leap of faith? There's no, burn your boats behind you, Viking style, or were you like, oh, I can still back out of this if I want to?
No, it was definitely the Vikings burn your boats. There was absolutely no reservations in my endeavor at all, Roman. I put the task in front of me, and I have this belief, and it's, if you start something, you see it through. And that's something that became self-evident to me after, basically perpetually not seeing things through. I didn't finish my studies at university. I did multiple things throughout life that, for me were just this lack of dedication. And when I found watchmaking, particularly handmade watchmaking, and the George Daniels method, that presented to me the single biggest challenge that I'd ever heard of or come across in my life. And I knew then that if I was going to prove to myself that I could dedicate myself to something, that this would be it.
Wow. With that decision, obviously, you were quite unwell, and there was a lot of time to reflect during that period. But was there anything specific that you can kind of point back to that was like a switch or a moment that you kind of decided that you wanted to do something all the way through, or you wanted to see it through, or you wanted to do something that was incredibly difficult? Like what put that in there if it hadn't been there before?
Hmm. I think it was during the the downtime when I was unwell. It was just so much soul searching and really true deep thinking, and I had time to think. Like there was quite a good amount of time where I had specialists in Sydney, Melbourne, South America, telling me that we have no idea what's wrong with you. All the best. Stay well. Um,
Wow.
and I was in this state at the time. I was on multiple medications, and no, it's okay. I'm happy to laugh about it now. It's not to say sorry. Um, and the real thing for me was I was so incredibly depressed. Well, when that was the answer, I just thought, well, if that's it, this is it. I'm out. I'm not doing this. I was in really chronic pain, and there was no cure, and I was up to my eyeballs on opiates, and things were just very grim. There were lots of nights just spent just moping basically.
Yeah.
Um,
Staring at the
and that's it. That's it. And I had this thought, it sort of formed over a period of time that came to, and it was, if there's a way out of this, if there's a path to health again, are you going to be serious? Like, are you going to live your life properly? And that was it. Like, I think you owe it to yourself to lead your life with the maximum amount of responsibility or load that you can bear.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really deep philosophical decisions that you made, and the frame of mind that you had to settle on this path is clearly something that's really important for you and for your soul well-being and all of that. I mean, I'm just conscious of the enormous weight that you placed on that decision to do something that is already unbelievably difficult. It's not like you said, well, I'm going to plant a garden and, damn it, I'm going to make sure those water it every day, and it will grow and I'll feel better. You went like, no, I'm going to do this really crazy thing that this one guy in England back in the 60s decided to do. And he was really the only one who could do it back in 1969, I think it was, when he made his first one. You know what I mean? Like, it's an unbelievably heavy burden to place on a decision, which now we're talking on a watch podcast. We are really glad that you stuck to it, because what you're making now is bloody unbelievable and fantastic. But it's for a young man as well to make that decision. I'm just hoping that people who are listening going like, that's what it takes to be a watchmaker. That's the drive you need.
Yeah, most certainly.
So it's just, it's amazing.
It's interesting you bring up the garden though, because that was actually the first thing that I delved into before, out of my recovery process. I actually started getting into bonsai.
Oh wow!
And then that developed into a veggie garden, and
I can see that.
And then I realized, I thought, these are great. I love them, but you don't get to do much. And they're great things, but I keep them, like, for sure. They're still there. I still take care of my plants, and we have our garden. But that's something that they're beautiful in a sense that they require very minimal attention, and it's something you have for a lifetime.
And the common denominator being
just
in
like
the
children.
miniature, also like children.
There's so many similarities with bonsai and children, including intentionally stunting their growth.
Roman,
tune in for next week's episode. Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so we're now at the moment where you've made a list of the equipment that you need. Talk us through that, because I know George Daniels, I've got a copy of Watchmaking on my shelf here, on my bookshelf. The first, chapter 1 is about setting up a workshop. Chapter 2 is all the equipment you need, and it's pretty big list. How much of the equipment you had before, and how much of an investment was it to really equip the thing you were going to do? Like, how much did you have to actually go out and buy?
Well, I severely underestimated the required tooling and machinery to make a watch.
Right.
So my initial investment was $2,500, and that was I was being careful with money. I didn't have an income at the time, and I bought a sincere Chinese watchmaker's lathe. After reading various reviews and seeing that there's actually a German company that has their lathes made by a Chinese manufacturer, and they just put their name on it at the end in Germany and sell it for 4 times the price. And there's a huge misconception in the world of tooling, and that's that the Chinese can't make great things. The Chinese can make the best things, but they can also make very, very cheap things. They can do the lot. But this lathe sort of sits somewhere in the middle. It's a good machine, but it's not, it's not a Swiss machine. And I ordered some hand tools, basic files, a little saw, really, really basic stuff. And my lathe arrived in the mail, and it was the first lathe I'd ever seen with my own eyes. So I actually had to figure out what a lathe was and how it worked. Which is really comical now looking back. It's almost hilarious. I wish I could have observed myself going through the process of trying to work it out. And I wired it up. I got a little motor out of a sewing machine, and I attached it to the lathe and made a little base for it. And I was set about making my first component for the watch, and then I realized I didn't have any tools to cut the material. And then I was sort of like, oh, where do you buy a tool for a watchmaker's lathe? And then everything I read was, you just make it. I was like, oh shit, now I need to
Right.
make a tool. There was all these firsts. But
Yeah.
yeah, I got there in the end, and I made my first components. I made the barrel, the mainspring barrel. Well, there's two in the watch, so I made two, and then I made two screws. If you're familiar with the Daniels movements, the two big screws at the top of the watch, the two big blue ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I made those, and then I was sort of stuck. I had some other things to make, and my machine wasn't equipped well enough to be able to handle it. I didn't have any, jigs, or I had basically none of the necessary tools to make components of a watch. And I went to a clock convention here run by the NAWCC, the Watch and Clock Collectors, and I
Mm-hmm.
brought those two little parts with me. And I walked into the convention. And I was thinking, I hope there's someone here who can tell me what I need to do to modify
Yep.
my machine to let me make the next part, because I was pretty stuck. And I, by chance, bumped into a man named Lindsay Draps. And Lindsay's he's 79 this year. He's a career-long engineer, job shopper. He did a lot of work for the CSIRO, and
Yep.
he
The science research. Yep. Organization. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, the science and research department here in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
cutting edge science. But Lindsay made some incredible things. Oh, the CSIRO is an
Yeah. Yeah.
incredibly important organisation. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Um, Lindsay actually made a machine that inflates the genitalia of insects. And there was a proposal made in the 19th century from a biologist that stated that we actually can't identify insects into their subspecies correctly because insects imitate other insects. So if you look at a moth, you can't be sure that it's a moth. It could be a wasp. There are many, many insects that basically pretend to be another insect for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are, say moths as an example, there are moths that look identical to other moths, but they're actually a completely different species, but they've just evolved to look the same so they can be accepted and live in the same area, eat the same food
Yeah.
without being attacked.
Mimicry. Yeah. Mimicry. Yep.
Mimicry. Thank you for the right word.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually made the machine and invented the machine that inflates the insect's genitalia to allow the biologists of the world, to identify insects into subspecies.
Wow.
See, Nick, I told you you can have a machine for that. You don't have to do it manually anymore.
Yeah.
Extremely kind of you,
Um,
Reuben.
yeah,
See, I told you there's got to be a machine. There's got to be a better way. No, that's amazing.
there's
I
got to
mean,
be a better way.
Somebody has done this before.
yeah. But it's amazing that Lindsay is both into watchmaking, right? Oh, sorry, you're about to tell us the connection between the watchmaking and also the other end of insect identification. That's amazing. That's
Sure.
CSIRO kind of encapsulated, isn't it? Research across
That is
multiple
true.
areas. Amazing.
I'll quickly just spurt out a couple other things because it gives good context to who he is and what he's done. He invented the machine that X-rays silicon that Samsung ended up buying. That's how they determine how to slice the silicon chips for solid state memory and computer processors.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
wow.
So he was the man who invented the machine to make computer chips and memory sticks. Anyway, all this list of inventions, and I went there, and his table that he had on display was all of these tools and machines that he'd made. And I thought, that's got to be the right guy. So I walked over to him and said, hello, I'm making a George Daniels tourbillon watch. Do you know? And he raised his eyebrows and just looked at me and was like, say that again, sorry? I was like, I'm making a George Daniels tourbillon watch. And he was like, he just straight away was like, you've got to come to my house. You've got to come to my workshop.
Wow.
Immediately. He's wrote his address down, meet me there this afternoon. So I went to his workshop, and he lives in this house, and it's three rooms, including the garage, a workshop, and it's 100% full of CNC machines that he's made. He's converted all of his own machinery to CNC. He's got 6 or 7 lathes, 10 mills. Every single thing in the whole room is made by him, and then he's got
Wow.
model tractors and caterpillars, like a caterpillar bulldozer that's at his doorway entrance.
Hmm.
1/5 scale, made every single component, every nut, bolt, the cylinder, 4-cylinder petrol engine, the radiator, every single thing. So I entered into this absolute world of like, whoa, what is this place? Like, who's this person? What is this? And that was sparked up probably the most important, or one of the most important relationships I'd make in my career. And he took me under his wing, and I once a week went to his house, and we made machines, or we still do. We make machines, we make jigs, we make tools, modify machinery, you name it, all in the name of making a watch here in Australia.
That's incredible.
I mean, what a story! Wow.
Is he still working, or he's kind of able to just tinker around and work with you, directly?
Yeah, no, he retired some 25 years ago, but he works harder than me, to be honest. He works 6 days a week, 10 or 11-hour days. Just he's either making things for other people, or making something for himself. He's currently making a 1913 tractor, a tractor that was made here in Australia. He's making a replica.
Wow.
See, it's amazing to me that there are people like that, and nobody kind of knows about them. But I mean, outside of their very small sort of circle. Imagine that's such a serendipitous thing that this young guy, you, happened to go on that weekend to that particular show, to that particular table, to ask that particular guy about something. Yeah, that's incredible. That's just such serendipity.
No, it's quite exceptional, and I don't know how the chances happen, but Eva Lube,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
actually
of course.
built her CNC machine, and she came and stayed with him for a couple of weeks, and he taught her CNC machining, and yeah, he's just helping people out basically, and in my opinion, he's a rock star. But yeah, as you say, no one knows, or outside of very niche circles, it's not something that someone knows.
That's remarkable. What was the coolest thing you found in his workshop?
The coolest thing in his workshop. Geez, there's a few, like a list, but yeah. He also invented the modern gem faceting machine, the machine that they use to facet diamonds and things. But the coolest thing, I reckon, for me at the time anyway, was he's got a hobbing machine, and a hobbing machine is a machine that cuts wheels and pinions, cuts gears. But he'd made this hobbing machine. It cuts them in a way that's unlike a mill or a lathe. It's a completely different method. It's a superior method, and it's automated. And he made this machine in the 90s with the most rudimentary electronics, that you can just put a blank watch wheel. So say you put a 20 millimeter piece of brass, you put it on the machine, then it has a little dial that like the odometers in the old cars that roll over. A dial like that, you put in the number of teeth, you hit start, and out comes a perfect watch wheel.
That's incredible.
Wow.
So that for me was eye-opening, because I'd just made watch wheels in my workshop that took me a couple of weeks. And here's this man who's programmed and made this machine that you can put, from 1 tooth to 999 teeth, off you go, hit play.
That's incredible. So he's a proper Tesla style genius.
Absolutely. Full, no hesitation in calling Lindsay an absolute genius.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because one of the questions I had meaning to ask you, and we might as well sort of ask it now, is I hear of watchmakers, young guy somewhere in Europe. Let's pick Germany or Switzerland. That's the common story, right? Young guy gets interested in watchmaking, decides to do it on his own, reads Daniel's book, or or Henry Freed's book, or whatever, right? Then finds a mentor somewhere, or either goes to work for an independent watchmaker, goes to school. Well, actually, no, firstly goes to school, watchmaking school, which you clearly didn't do. Then finds a place, either works for one of the big companies or finds an independent watchmaker and kind of learns, makes his bones, as they say in the food industry, like works from the ground up until gets skills. You went completely the other way. And one of the questions I had was, as somebody living in Australia, so far away from the horological centers of the world, like, how do you do it on your own? Like, that's the question I had. And that sort of, the Lindsay story kind of helps at least to answer some of that, you were lucky enough to find a mentor.
Absolutely, and Lindsay's he very quickly introduced me to his best friend, Roger Little, and Roger Little's a watchmaker here in Canberra with 65 years experience, and he's got a
Wow.
workshop that you'd only see in Switzerland. Basically, he's got the Ferraris of every machine and the know-how how to use them, and he's also become a fundamental mentor of mine. But more so in he's helped me set up my own horological business in clock repairs and those sorts of things.
Wow. So talk us through then. You meet Lindsay. At this moment you've made two barrels and you've made two screws. You found Lindsay. He's taught you. He's kind of giving you some more pointers. So you're learning, in a sense, you're learning to make a watch by making a watch, isn't it? Like, you're learning each next step is you're learning how to make that bit. Is that right?
That's correct. What I'm learning from Lindsay is the art of tool making,
Yeah.
and then the watchmaking is sort of up to me. But that's not to say he doesn't possess the skills, but it's just I've very much made my watch. It's my journey. I don't ever seek help on how to make my watch. It's my thing, and it's my learning process. I think another thing that I used to do was just run things, burn them out as quickly as possible and get to the end, the goal as quickly as possible. And well, this watch isn't about that. This watch is about making a fully functional workshop that can make production pieces in the future. It's about learning, uh, intimately the art of watchmaking. So, yeah.
Is there anybody that you kind of turn to within the watch industry proper, I suppose, like other independent watchmakers or, potentially people beyond, I think Roger and Lindsay, who
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of engineering experience and a lot of understanding on how to make tools and machines and those sorts of things, but watchmaking specifics, if it's design or decoration or, potentially away from the maybe the more mathematical side to kind of pigeonhole it.
Into the art of watchmaking.
Yeah, I suppose, or just anybody who's who you kind of might turn to or to ask questions to that isn't or that is a kind of a watchmaker or a clockmaker in outside of Australia.
No, nobody.
Wow, fantastic! Is that something that you kind of want, or it's something that you're specifically not looking for?
It's a good question. I've been thinking a lot about this sort of a thing recently of why I don't. I make very, as we've discussed before, um, I've made a very minimal effort to network and to actually get myself into um, the community that is watchmaking and independent watchmaking.
Yeah.
And up until now, I just haven't been interested. For me, it's not about what other people are doing. And there was a brief moment there when I started posting on social media that I discovered that there was all these other independent watchmakers in the world, and um, it really detracted me from my own work. And I started looking at their work and my work and thinking, oh, they're doing this, they're doing that, and my head was in scrambles. So I just found it better not to follow it all. I don't follow any other watchmakers really.
So rather than kind of compare and contrast,
Wow.
you'd much rather, I guess, work in a vacuum and see what comes out at the end.
Absolutely. I really like the idea of getting to know, my predecessors, the greats of the past. Daniel's been the most immediate, but of course, Breguet, Earnshaw, Arnold, Leroy, fantastic makers of the past, and I like to read about their work, and I like to observe their work and understand it as best as I possibly can.
Wow.
Well, that sounds very much in keeping with the George Daniels back in 1969 when he set off as well. He wasn't looking around what contemporaries were doing because there weren't really any that he could emulate or even take an interest in. He sort of went back in time. So, what's your yardstick then for evaluating your own work, or the goal, the end point, I guess, is what of where you're going to end up?
You asking how do I evaluate my own work, or where I'm going?
Yeah, well, I mean, how will you know when the piece is finished? Right. So what's the end point of the watch? Is it that it ticks? Is that it ticks and keeps time? Is that it works perfectly and the finishing is the same as the Daniels? Do you know what I mean? Like, because I
Hmm.
would imagine, not being a watchmaker, perfection is an ever receding goal, right? It's a horizon thing, right?
For sure, it is. It's this sort of. It's almost sickening in a sense. It's this eternal pursuit of perfection, and
Yeah,
every
yeah,
time
yeah.
you improve, or say you have a part. It's a blank piece of steel. You do all the machining. You do everything. This that the other. You get to the end and you look at it and you think that's lovely. And then you really look at it under the microscope and you think, it's okay. Like
Could be better.
it'll
Could be
work.
better.
Yeah, exactly. Could do better. And as soon as it's sort of about ironing out all those things. Could do better. Okay, and you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, back to the machine. Off you go. Um, and I sort of begun making my watch in that sense that I'd make a part and I'd finish it all the way to my best possible ability, and then move on to the next one. And I've actually changed that method now, and I'm actually just making every part mechanically sound and
Hmm.
in a way that I know it's of a quality high enough to be finished to a high level, and then I'm going to worry about finishing at the end, because some days I'll be assembling and disassembling the watch 10, 11, 12 times, and you undoubtedly eventually put marks on the watch. So there's no point in making it mirror polished until the time comes.
And with the previous or the previous method you were using, where you would kind of say, "Oh, could be better, could have done better there," is that against a Daniels museum watch or something as an example, or you just know that in yourself you could have done a better job on finishing those teeth or whatever it might have
Mm.
been.
Yeah, Daniels certainly became the gold standard for me. So if it didn't look like his part, then it wasn't good enough. And you can always make things look how you want it to look or whatever. But at the end of the day, and a lot of people criticize George Daniels for his crudeness in hand finishing. Um, I disagree entirely. I think he has a very subdued and quite a lovely finishing style, and I think his watches are finished perfectly. I don't see any reason to say otherwise. But they're very different from how the Swiss finish their watches, for example, with you know beveling and anglage on every single possible angle or corner. But for me, this watch is about trying to, as I said previously, and as Roman, as you referred to, the fact that Daniels was connecting with his predecessors of the greats, and I feel like the watch that Daniels uh, has you making in his book is a condensation or a distillation of the best innovations and the best parts of all of the greats throughout the history. And I wanted to familiarize myself with them and with Daniels. So I'm trying to make my watch look like a George Daniels watch to understand how his method is.
When you mention the fact that his watch doesn't look like Swiss watches, is there something about the
Hmm.
fact that he is English and is kind of clearly apart from the Swiss tradition that attracts you to him as an Australian on the other side of the world to most of what's happening?
I do believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. I'm not necessarily going to go into specifics why, but there's something about his style, his method, his philosophy that resonates with me really well.
Yeah, fantastic.
And do you think when your watch is complete, will you need to do for yourself? Will you need to do the kind of the pilgrimage to Rivensdale on the Isle of Man, to see Roger Smith, to kind of, to present your watch as kind of the, the laying on of hands, if you know what I mean, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that laying on of hands is the best example, like that kind of the apostolic succession, his master observed his watch, so I can kind of, that's the yardstick I need to meet. Is that something you can envisage yourself doing? Maybe presenting your work when it's ready to, I don't know, Roger Smith or Philippe Dufour or whoever the yardstick is in your mind, as saying, I've made this, is it good enough in inverted commas, to get the blessing of the best, if you like? Or does that completely not, or is that something you're not interested in? Like, or you're doing it until you're satisfied and that's your yardstick is like, it's as best I can do. I don't need anyone else to see it.
No, I'm more than happy to make the trip over to visit Roger Smith and his team there on the Isle of Man, and yeah, I'm welcoming of the criticism and the critique of the watch. And of course, I do fundamentally believe that Daniels is my master, and sure, I don't have him in the person telling me exactly what to do, but you've read Watchmaking. It's written as if he was over your shoulder talking to you, and I feel like he leaves it pretty clear, particularly with the color plates in the book. It's pretty clear what you need to be making and how it needs to look, and he doesn't leave out the details of how well his watch has kept time and all of these other aspects. So I think one knows when the watch is actually of a Daniels standard or not. But given that Roger is, the closest connection that I'll ever have to George, I'd love to show him the watch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. How long do you think the watch will take, or how long has it taken now, and how many hours? I mean, do you think you would take to complete?
It's roughly 2 to 2,500 hours at the moment, and
Oh,
I I do think it will take quite a bit more, probably another 1,000. That's
mhm.
just an estimate though, because I've been so naive at every corner to think, 18 months ago I was like, oh, the watch will be done in 3 months. I'm on the home stretch, and then you realise
It'll
that
be ticking by the
that's right.
weekend.
Then you
Yeah.
realise you've got to make a new machine to make a particular component, and then you've got to make hand tools and the rest. Um, and so I would really like to spend a bit of time this year making a Rose engine and a Guilloche machine. That would be lovely. I would love
Mm,
to have that in my workshop, and they're not available in Australia, and importing one is pretty well, it's a very expensive endeavor, because they're very heavy, and obviously shipping from Europe is difficult. And
sure.
so I'm highly considering investing quite a good portion of my year into making a Rose engine and Guilloche machine.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I mean, that is one of the 32 skills I think that George talks about in his book. So,
Yeah,
wow. Another question I had was kind of, you briefly mentioned, that you've built up a clock repair business as, as your day job, in once again, in inverted commas. How does working in clocks help the watchmaking, or is it a completely different kind of, um, skill set, or
Mm,
completely different discipline?
that's actually a really good question, Roman. I think it can be often confused that clock repair or clockmaking is just big watchmaking, and it's not. There are many similarities. Of course, it's the closest thing to watchmaking that isn't watchmaking. However, it's incredibly different. The the tools you're using are either 20 times the size or different. The tolerances are different. The mechanisms are different. Given that some clocks like carriage clocks and some smaller clocks do have balance wheels like in watches, but the majority of clocks are
Hmm.
pendulum clocks, and that's fundamentally very different to a balance setup or an escapement in a watch. But the idea for me was that I wanted to pursue. I needed an income, and it would, of course, the ideal thing would be to continue to be using tools and being in a similar environment with similar mechanism and tools in my hands for as much of the day as possible. So clock repair just seemed like a very obvious endeavor for me.
Wow. Yeah, because there's not a lot of contemporary watchmakers who are also sort of clockmakers or work on clocks. I recently I had a chat with David Walter, who is this Australian-born watchmaker and clockmaker, and he makes unbelievable watches and clocks. But there's sort of not many. I mean, George was one. He put a grasshopper escapement on a grandfather clock, and
Hmm.
he worked in marine chronometers and all
Hmm.
sorts of stuff. But there's not many contemporary masters. Konstantin Chaikin's another one I can think of who does both. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that you've kind of had to learn both at the same time as you journey into horology. It's an amazing journey you're traveling, learning both at the same time.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I love working on the clocks, and I try and specialize in parts manufacture. So my favorite thing is when someone comes to me. I'll give you an example. People came to me with a clock that came out of the Tattersalls estate, the lottery
Oh
company,
wow.
and it was a clock that was made in 1705 for Chinese royalty by an English maker, and an
Mm.
absolutely beautiful clock, absolutely beautiful long case clock. And it had five or six missing components, and it had another five or six that were beyond the point of repair. And for me, there's something so enjoyable about being able to look at the mechanism and understand and conceptualize what's missing, making it, putting it together, and then having the clock brought back to life for the first time in a long time. That's an extremely rewarding process, and it's maybe like a very small version of what it will be like when my watch is complete and ticking in my hand. But it's wins like that. Then maybe that takes 3 or 4 weeks, but at the end you've got a huge boost in your motivation in your work.
Yeah. With that sort of almost restorative process, Reuben, um, is it a kind of difficult thing to work out, you know, which components can be saved and which ones need to be totally remade, and at what point does that kind of, I guess, maybe undermine the original state of the clock or the watch?
When the clock's been remade completely, is it still the original clock?
Yeah.
Um,
That's that philosophical thing with the ship, wasn't it? If you
that's
replace a plank at a
Yeah.
time,
that's it. That's
the
it.
ship of Sithius or something. Yeah.
Look, I think I always do my absolute best to identify how the original maker made. Say there's a wheel missing, but there's another 14 wheels on the clock. Looking at those wheels and identifying how they were made, what was the method, and trying to replicate that as accurately or as closely as possible. So if that means you have to make a new cutter to cut the profile on the teeth because they're individual to the maker, so be it. And if the wheels and the clock all look patinaed and aged, how do you achieve a result that is the same? I believe, coming from being a lover of the making process, that if a restoration is done correctly, that no value has been removed from the clock. But I am sure there are collectors who believe otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. I guess it is a very hard, and potentially comes just down to personal preference of what the value in 100% original parts are compared to replacement, and if it's replacement from yourself or a manufacturer. Again, if it's a clock, that's not going to be possible. But no, it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it's a question I try and put to the say to the client, and that's a lot of people are very hesitant to, if I come back and say, oh look, these two parts, they need to be remade. They're unrecoverable, irrecoverable. Um, but I try and put the point to them, this clock's 250 years old. It's seen a lot of hands, and often you can point out, this part was replaced maybe 50 years ago. This part was replaced maybe 100 years ago. this clock isn't the clock that came out of the factory.
Yeah.
So I feel like clockmakers have always, throughout history, when required, parts made.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching an interview with George Daniels, and I only bring George up because we've spoken a lot about him.
Sure.
Is somebody asked him that same question and what his approach to restoration was, and from memory, George said something like, when he makes a restoration, he aims to do it so that there's no sign that the clock's been restored. That he will make the part to match the existing style as much as possible.
Yeah.
So his ideal restoration is you can't tell that it's been restored. And there are other restorers and watchmakers who actually, insist on making the part different so they get credit for making that part. They make it visible so that someone says, oh, that bit had to be remade, so I've made it so you could see.
Absolutely.
Whereas George's philosophy was you make it as much, try to match the original composition, finishing, method of manufacture, as you were saying, to blend in, to give this, as if your hands were never in the clock in the first place. So yeah, it's just a really interesting
Absolutely.
approach, isn't it?
I've got a few peers that we, talk and share knowledge on, or, work. If someone needs, not a lot of people have the manufacturing capabilities in terms of making components. So I get a lot of clockmakers who will get me to make things for them. And a lot of people will actually ask, I want the component to be 10 out of 10 finished, high polish, beautiful looking, and then they'll actually stamp the part before it goes in the clock. So as you, there's two,
Yeah.
there's definitely
Yeah.
people are one or the other. It's either, no, I'm leaving my mark here, or no, I'm leaving no
Yeah.
trace.
Yeah. So you just got a laser engrave, Reuben Schoots somewhere.
Yeah.
Or put a QR code,
Imagine that in a nice antique clock.
Well, at some point, QR codes will be an obsolete, format as well. So it'll be like, oh, look, they used this adorable QR code. We haven't seen that for 300 years. One of the questions I had was like talking, like listening to you speak about the watchmaking part of it. So if we take it forward, so you finished this clock, is the next stage ideal end game for you to become an independent watchmaker and be sort of fully employed in watchmaking, or do you think you would always want to have the clocks as a side project, restoration, while you're taking commissions and making watches? Or is it too far ahead
No, not at
to
all.
think about?
I'm always very happy to see interesting and different clocks. I hope to, have the opportunity to work on rare and exquisite pieces into the future. But no, my future lays in independent watchmaking. That's for sure.
And so to talk us through what you would like to do. So this watch you're making, the foundation piece, let's call it, the Scoots Daniels, your name goes first because you made it. Is the idea the next watch will be a Scoots watch? Or do you think you'll do another Scoots, another maker, Scoots Breguet, Marie Antoinette? Or, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Are you
Yes.
looking to go your own way, or, revisit another master?
I think this will be the last watch that I ever make that's not my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
I chose the Daniels watch on purpose, and obviously, like I chose it, but I knew that making
Well, he chose you.
it could be. I knew that making a tourbillon watch, particularly a Daniels watch, was going to be something that would bring me the most amount of recognition for my endeavor, for my work. And well, I didn't know that. I hoped, I bet on that this would be something that would be a great, a foundation, as you say. And but it's the exercise in getting to know. For example, the escapement is an Earnshaw escapement that was a development on an Arnold escapement that is sitting within a tourbillon carriage that is an invention of Breguet. The watch it delves into all of these masters over the history, and it really is a distillation of the best mechanical. Well, it's obviously debatable, but in my opinion, it's in the 1960s when George first made this watch. It was a distillation of the high points of horology over the last 500 years.
Mm.
And I wanted to do that, finish it. I knew that within that there'd be a lot of machine making. The exercise in making the watch is also an exercise in making the workshop, and that's something that a lot of people don't see, or that aren't as interested in, perhaps because that's something that only maybe makers are interested in. But it's about getting the tooling, the machines, the space. For example, things like the Rose machine, the Guilloche machine. They're all very important into me actually launching into production, where I'm making my own timepieces.
Wow, that is I mean, that's very exciting and a very bold step, which is fantastic. How do you think you will approach and once again, we're fast forwarding here, the next watch? Will the next watch be, I'm making this and I will find somebody to buy it? Or do you think you'll be more consultative? You find a client who wants to commission a piece, he or she wants a particular thing, and you'll make it to their specification? Because that's kind of another fork in the road that I often sort of, ask indie watchmakers who are just starting out. Do you make what you want to make and then find the audience, or do you wait for the audience to kind of tell you what to make?
These are I like these questions, Roman. You've clearly thought, quite.
I'm all about existential questions here.
Yeah.
And you can just take the fifth as well. You don't have to answer. You can just punt it down.
No, I'm happy to answer.
I'm just fascinated about the thinking, because this is so far away from my own skill set. Like, I'm amazed by the stuff that you do. It's just beyond my understanding how people can make stuff with their hands that works.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm just kind of trying to kind of understand how somebody who's a young man, already on this really difficult but exciting journey, and to me, you seem like somebody who plans things ahead. Like, I'm trying to get into your head, and hopefully our listeners are as interested in it as I am.
Yeah. I've thought about this extensively, as you would imagine, and I keep flirting with the idea of, I'll just do this, I'll just do that, or if someone says they want that, I'll do it. And at the end of the day, if you're making a watch by yourself, it's going to take you a minimum of a year. It's likely to be longer than a year. And I think when you think about that and the contract that you're getting yourself into, I think it's very important to be making something you want to make. So in that, in saying that, I think I'll be making a watch, and hopefully there's a collector out there that says, I'd like to buy that.
That's so exciting, especially in Australia.
Yes, it's something.
Yeah. And when obviously, again, kind of down the road, when you are getting into the wristwatch side of things, will you just be starting with the one and maybe making them, per commission, or will you be, trying to serially produce, a range of watches or a collection? Have you had any thoughts on that?
I have been thinking about it. I haven't actually been able to sort of nail down exactly what it will look like. Not the watch itself, but as you say, is it going to be a series? Is it going to be production? Is it going to be a few watches? I know what I like in watchmaking, and I know what the watch that I want to produce will be. I think I've toyed with the idea of producing the same watch, gold, rose gold, white gold, platinum, something like that. A limited run of 4 or 5 pieces. Then I've toyed with the idea of producing an individual watch and then never making that same watch again. I really don't know. Economically, it makes sense to make more than one watch, because a large amount of your time is just setting up of a machine, and you may as well, instead of making one wheel, you may as well make 5.
Yeah.
So
you amortize your R&D, of course.
That's right.
In terms of what it might look like, is that something you can share, or will we have to hold our breath?
A bit of both. It's I like classical watchmaking.
Yeah,
that's pretty much all I'll give off there.
I mean, we could have guessed from the Daniels passion, but that's
yeah.
Well, you could have done the Daniels. I'm going steampunk. Meets.
Daniels has been ticked off. I'm ready to do a bit of Richard Mille.
Go, Evan. Well, let's hope you don't stoop that one. You know, so well, let's talk about kind of the next phase. So, being an independent watchmaker now, clockmaker, but let's say, you know, one of the other things I find really interesting is how do you connect with an audience, with an appreciating audience, you know, who will be potentially interested in your work? Do you have thoughts about, you know, is social media the best way? Is, you know, direct approaches through, you know, an established retailer who may or may not have, you know, an appreciative audience of well-heeled collectors who might be interested? Like, how do you actually do the, you know, the grimy stuff of actually selling these things? Because ultimately you need to sell to make more.
Of course, you know, connecting with collectors and connoisseurs that's the most important thing for my career. Aside from actually making a watch, that's number two.
Mm,
Or you know, it's one.
mm,
They're both necessary. And
of course.
I have been putting more effort in recently into my social media and trying to share properly my story and my journey and my work. And I'm still sort of in the teething phase of really trying to. Uh, it's it's become a very strange thing. Like I've been fortunate enough recently. I'm doing this podcast with you now, and the ABC did an article recently, and you know I'm still in the very much the infancy of my career, and sort of teething out what is my story. And I'm not inventing a story. I was for quite a long time embarrassed by my story. I didn't think it was legitimate, and I didn't think that people would have any empathy for why I was doing this. Or you know,
Oh, that's interesting.
I really felt that people would just be like, "Ha, there's a guy trying to be a watchmaker," you know. And I've just sort of, you know, what I've realized is that you know, me sharing who I am, I know that a connoisseur or a collector, someone who's you know a potential buyer of one of my timepieces, is uh, they're buying the watch because they want to buy the story of the maker as well. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so I'm trying to be more transparent and open about where I've come from, where I'm going, where I am. So in saying that, my Instagram and YouTube, I've been trying to share more content. I gravitate more towards Instagram due to the ease, and you know, it doesn't take too
Sure.
much time. And time is a really, funnily enough, time is a really, really difficult thing for me to manage. I've got to earn an income. I've got to publicize myself. I've got to, you know, la 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 la. I've got to make a watch, and
Mm.
it's a seriously long endeavor, and it requires a lot of time working. So I'm trying to work out at the moment, and I'm still you know in the process of working out what's the best value mediums that where I can share my story, where I can share my work.
Yeah, it's a real. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about sort of the social media and the independent watchmaking scene, and I mean, I'm sort of keen to hear your thoughts on it because I see it as sort of as a double-edged sword, as in we're very fortunate we live in at a time where social media allows you to connect directly to the makers, which has been, you know, an incredible boon. But on the other hand, there is a lot of people out there making stuff, you know, and so as a young watchmaker, how do you make yourself stand out from the crowd is a really kind of fine balance. I don't know if you found that as well in your own kind of, you know, interactions with people on Instagram.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. When I first, you know, when I first started this endeavor, I'd never heard of anyone even. I didn't even know a watchmaker, someone who you know is servicing and working with watches, let alone someone
Mm.
who made watches. Um, and then the wonderful world of social media, particularly Instagram, sort of opened this door, and it was like, oh look, there's actually there's a fair number of people, you know, doing this. Not
Mm.
exactly the way I'm doing it. Everyone's got their own way and their own method and whatever. And that was actually for me something. It wasn't encouraging because it's not that I wanted to be doing something no one else was doing. I was just detracting from my own journey, and so I just sort of turned that
Mm.
off and I unfollowed basically everyone on social media. and just said, just have it,
Except for Nick and I.
just do your journey, and just tell myself, just do your thing and put your honest work into your watch. And I feel like with honesty and truth of my story that I'm my cards are on the table. I've got my bets down that my career will work out.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you're doing is, I mean, as we were talking before the podcast, I've sort of binge watched about a couple of hours of your YouTube, videos as well, of following you showing that you're making parts and actually talking about the different machines you set up and, all of that. And I once again, I can barely understand the technical things, but seeing somebody actually make the stuff is hugely inspiring for me. Is just seeing that happening on Australian soil, and it hugely builds in my mind kind of the cachet of the Scoots name, or the stuff, the endeavor that you're trying to do. Just seeing that happen is really cool. Yeah, and it's a really worthwhile thing.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it and you like seeing it.
Absolutely. Well, I think as well, Reuben, it's, you've got to be a storyteller as well to a degree. And I think you're doing a very good job of that. Through your YouTube and Instagram as well. Just kind of communicating what it is you're doing and how it is you're doing what you're doing. And I think naturally, people will kind of seek you out and find you if they're interested in that sort of thing. So yeah, I think you're doing all the right things in that regard.
Thanks for that, Nick. I appreciate that, particularly coming from a professional as yourself.
No, not at all. Well, yeah, just think like if you look at the other kind of successful independent watchmakers or very successful independent watchmakers over the last decade or so, they've all had a story that you've kind of been able to get behind, even if you might not have any specific relationship to it. Like, as you say, potentially a huge part of the reason why you're attracted to Daniel specifically is the fact that he isn't in the Swiss establishment, and he's based in the UK, and he comes from a history, or I guess a history of clockmaking as opposed to watchmaking, or at least English watchmaking. And other independents as well. I think, it's always the story. And once you kind of understand their origin stories, you're much more interested in the work because you understand the context of it. And once you have the context of it, then it's significantly more easy to understand why it exists and why you might be attracted to it. So, I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I can't wait for more people to hear about it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So give us a bit of a ballpark then of when do you think this watch will be ready to sort of present to the world? Now, a question I sort of had to ask was, is the watch you're making now, the foundation piece, will that be a watch that do you think you'll eventually sell, or will this be something that you will keep as kind of a reminder of the journey undertaken?
Another brilliant question.
2 in one show. That's batting double.
Not bad, Reuben. You're on fire.
I'm just on to my next whiskey. That's all.
Oh, fair enough.
The,
See, that's what happens. That's right.
I think that I've gone just like a pendulum. I've gone from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Yeah.
Am I going to sell the watch? Am I going to keep the watch? Am I going to sell the watch? Am I going to keep the watch? Is someone going to want to buy the watch? Am I going to be stuck with the watch? Am I going to sell? It just keeps happening. It's month to month. I've at the moment, and for the last 6 months, I've very much become comfortable in thinking that I won't sell the watch.
Yeah.
But you never know.
Mm.
You never know. When will it be done? The foundational piece. I would like to think that entering 2022, that I'm very close to being in production of my own watch.
Wow. So will that be kind of lining up with the first tourbillon pocket watch being completed?
I believe so. I flirted very much with the idea of getting another watch underway at the moment, because there are it's very enticing to begin your own watch now. But as I said, if you start it, then see it through. So it will be upon completion.
That's exciting.
Mm.
The first moment in the Scoots Museum.
In Canberra.
Well, I mean, Canberra is always attracting tourists, but now it's definitely worth a trek. So one of the questions I sort of had, Reuben, was give us a day in the life of an independent watchmaker, clockmaker. Are you sort of up at 3 a.m. George Daniel style, or work 48 hours through, or something. Like, I'm just curious that the actual process. Well, because George was notorious about, I think because he had the Bentleys that he was working on, so I think he managed to squeeze his week of watchmaking into like 3 days, work like 48 hours straight, and then go to bed, deliver the work on Wednesday, and then spend the rest of the week on watches on Bentleys. I'm hoping you're not sticking to that schedule.
I will be taking up another restoration of a car soon, so maybe the George Daniels schedule will come into play.
Wow.
Cars and watches. There you go. The parallels are uncanny.
Yeah, they go hand in hand, and I really enjoy cars. I really enjoy driving. Very much. I and so fortunate to have found watchmaking in the sense that I enjoy driving a lathe or a milling machine as I do in driving a car. There's something about being, the human interface controlling a machine that I don't know. I enjoy it. But a day in the life for me, I definitely don't have the George Daniels routine. If I'm training for a particular goal or event, I will wake up only 3 mornings of a week early, and by early I mean 5:30, so not 3 a.m.
Sleep in, yep.
Yeah, so sleep in, and if I'm not doing that, I'm normally waking 7:30. Something that happened to me after becoming ill is that I require now a huge amount more sleep to function properly.
Yeah.
So I cultivate my sleep as much as possible. So 7:30, I always start the day with a cooked breakfast and coffee. I get into the workshop. On a day that I'm working on the watch, I'll be pretty sure what I'm working on the night before. I'll get in, I'll work on the watch. I usually have, one break, which is lunch, and I'll work basically until I'm satisfied that I've done enough work for the day. And I used to struggle a lot with, I would just continue working until I couldn't work. And now I'm very much self-limiting, and I stop well before the negative impacts of overworking
Sure.
set in. And once work's over, can be quite an intense day, hunched over on a desk, particularly if you're using magnification for a lot of the day, or if you're making something that's new, you're problem solving and you're stumbling a lot. So there can be a lot of frustration, particularly on days if you might have been working on a component for 3 weeks and you might stuff it up and start again. So at the end of the workday, I like to get down. I either go for a run by the river or in the mountains. I like to run up hills or up mountains to just for another sort of challenge. It's very humbling to run up a mountain. And then I usually get into the sauna or the steam room, and then I'll get into the pool and I swim underwater. And that's very meditative for me. Absolutely, that's my favorite part of the day, the swim under the water. I like it's you hold your breath and you very quickly, within a matter of 30 to 40 seconds swimming underwater, you're met with a very abrupt feeling of holy fuck, and I like that. And I like to try and push that feeling away and go for as long as possible, and then it's normally home for a quick bit of dinner and into bed. I like to be in bed about 8 o'clock.
Sounds great.
That's a very measured day, which I think suits the intensity of your Yeah.
What's your record, Reuben? Underwater.
Underwater. um, it's probably not very impressive, but my record underwater is 55 meters.
That's very impressive.
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Not going down. That's horizontal, but underwater.
No, but still, I'd be, I don't know, Roman, if you've, damn, Roman, if you can swim more than 55 meters underwater, that's a
No.
serious,
No.
that's a
No.
serious
No.
thing.
Definitely start getting, little electric lightning shocks coming into the peripherals.
Yeah, wow.
But it's nice. It's very relaxing.
It's a cheap thrill, but wow.
It's a cheap thrill. Each their own, eh?
And then,
Yeah, well, oxygen deprivation. Nothing clears the mind like a bit of oxygen deprivation. That's for sure.
It's good for I heard it's good for maintaining brain cells.
yeah, right.
Fingers crossed.
Actually, not. Definitely not.
No. When you run, Ruben, do you an important question? Do you run with or without music?
Never ever. No music.
Good.
See, I was actually going to ask, when you run, do you think about watches? Like, do you do you meditate? Because if running's meditative, do you think about a particular problem you're experiencing in the workshop, or thinking about the next day's manufacturing while you run, or is running you just clear your mind and kind of just one step in front of the other?
I started running because of a particular component that I was having difficulty making, and yeah, it's basically my time to think and problem solve.
What was the component?
Balance stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know how to make one. That's true. They're tricky to make.
It's very
You're
tricky.
not running enough, Roman.
Probably not. You're right. Exactly. Maybe I should up it. That's right. Maybe that's what it is. Look, it's. I mean, the reason I'm sort of I'm asking is I'm sort of curious. Yeah, I'm curious about kind of the inner life of a watchmaker, because I'm amazed by what what you guys and girls produce, which is once again beyond anything I'll ever be able to do. So I'm always interested about the inner mechanisms of watchmakers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And
That gets me excited.
What you alluded to earlier, the weight of the goal or the weight of the task that I put on myself, and there's a tough side to this too. It's not all romantic. It's romantic in the sense it's kind of like it's romantic like alcoholism's romantic. But you know what I,
That's going to be.
do you know what I mean?
That's going to be the byline of. That's the title of the episode. Watchmaking is as romantic. Alcohol for the soul. Yeah.
No, I don't mean like not maybe not the best analogy, but there is a romanticism about the idea of drinking and just like numbing the pain and this sort of thing, and watchmaking is it's bloody difficult, to be completely frank, and there's a lot of failure, and particularly when you're doing it by yourself. A lot of people have watchmakings in their family, or they had a master at Patek Philippe, or this, that, the other, and I haven't got any of those things. I've got some mentors that can show me tool making and things, but really the watchmaking journey is on me. And there's been, there's many moments that are very stressful.
Has there ever been a moment where you wanted to just throw the towel in and say maybe this isn't for me?
I'd be lying if I said that thought hadn't come into my head, but if I can sort of share genuinely, has that ever become a real thought? No, it hasn't got to that point.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be. I knew there was going to be tough moments.
Yeah. How do you kind of stay focused when that might come into the periphery of what you're thinking about?
Well, usually those sort of thoughts come in when you're continually failing. I can give you an example. I was making a component, not a very difficult component to make, but it was in a moment of quite a bit of stress in life, or whatever. Like you're not feeling great for a couple of weeks, and things just your head's a bit fuzzy or whatever. And I decided in that moment to make it was the pillars for the tourbillon carriage, and they're minuscule little things. They're a millimeter diameter with a 0.4 millimeter thread on the bottom, and then they've got a drilled and tapped hole with a 0.35 millimeter thread in the top, and they're really small, so they're very fragile. And I decided to make these components in this moment of chaos in life, and I failed. I don't remember if it was 22 or 23 times, but I just continually failed. I would put in 8 or 9 hours of work and then fail or break it or lose it, and it just kept happening. And it got to the point where went through all the motions, and um, it was a really important. Why I'm sharing this is it ended up being a very important lesson for me, because it ended up being it went from disastrous, stressful. Like, I basically lost the plot because everything I did kept failing. And it's like, you fail every day for 3 weeks straight. It hurts the soul of it, and it ended up just becoming comical. And that was a really important moment where it was like, like, it's just going to keep happening, and you're going to accept it, or you're going to recognize why you're failing. And for me, that was a huge lesson in identifying when I'm in a mindset that actually permits that work that demands a high level of focus.
And is that uh, is that potentially a lesson that informed what Roman was asking earlier about your routine, or trying to make sure that's a mindset that you find yourself in as often as possible?
Yeah, I most certainly try and maintain particularly for my partner's sake and my family's sake, I try and maintain a level of equilibrium in my mood. Um, and yeah, it's very important, and that's where the things like the sauna and the underwater swimming and the running, that's where they really chimed in. It was important to have an outlet, because I don't have a friend or a partner that I can. Well, I talk to my partner at depth about watchmaking. In fact, she's very very close to understanding absolutely everything I do. I feel sorry for her sometimes, um, but I don't have.
Oh, she's a keeper.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Um, but I, I burden her enough with the stress and the negative impact that when things are going wrong, then I didn't necessarily have someone else that I could ring up and be like, oh, when you're turning a 0.1 millimeter pivot on a balance staff and it breaks, and because you've hardened the steel in the wrong way, like, people don't care for that conversation. Um, so it was about finding a release that wasn't alcohol or drugs. So yeah, running, swimming, and sauna.
Well, running will do it.
Yeah, look, thank you for the honesty. Yeah, one of the no, I just wanted to say thank you for the honesty, because I find with high watchmaking or art or any sort of thing where there's a high level of beauty or artistic achievement, we often focus on the dizzying successes,
Hmm.
but not a lot of kind of attention gets paid to the humbling difficulties, right? The things that makers encounter that they have to work through. And for anyone else out there who's thinking about making watches or doing painting or whatever it is, playing music to a high level, it's a really important message to hear, that that failure is actually kind of normal and regular, and even people who do things really 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 well still have those humbling moments of when the tourbillon pillar is the 22nd one in a row is not coming out like you wanted. You just have to push through, and it's a testament to both your skill and perseverance, which then actually makes the watch that you will make in the end, the culmination of so much unseen, you know, effort and toil, which is, makes it even. That's why I think independent watchmaking is such a special thing, because the end product is the culmination of so much toil and love and passion and frustration and achievement in the end. So, thank you for sharing that.
You're most welcome. You're welcome to ask me, as you have been. I think ask me anything you like, and I'll very happily answer. Honestly, it's not an issue.
Just to that point, Ruben. Is there any, I don't know, maybe would there be three things that or three bits of advice you might give yourself, when you were starting watchmaking, or somebody else that is thinking about becoming a watchmaker, based on what you've learned through your journey so far?
if I could go back and tell myself a few things, the first one would be don't race. It's not a race.
Mm.
And on the inception of the beginning of my watchmaking journey, I told myself that, and it was about the process, not about the destination or the goal. But there's something so attractive about racing towards a goal that, for me anyway, it's something that it's like it's an inherent trait that I have. It's just like, oh, just get there immediately at all costs. So I would just tell myself to just chill out and enjoy the journey, and be so grateful that the journey is here. And I'm relatively young. I've got hopefully plenty of time to master my craft. And so yeah, go slow, don't race would be a big one. Another one would be, if someone out there listening is looking at getting into to make it, once someone wants to make a watch, would be buy the best possible tools that you can afford. And if you can't afford them, save up and buy the best possible tools. Because when you buy cheap tools or mediocre machine, you're just buying another one in the future. If you're serious about where you're
Mm.
going, if you're serious about what you're doing, trust in yourself and make the investment. It's worth it. Um, I used to have a lot of fear about spending money on this goal that seems so unlikely when in at the inception. But if I could go back now, I would have spent all of the money that I had saved at the time, which was enough money. It's more money than I have now. I would have spent that all on my workshop immediately, because I was committed. So if you're committed, don't worry about the financial costs. It's a question I get asked quite often. People will message me on Instagram or email, and they'll say, "I want to make a watch. Can you please tell me what tools and machines I need to buy and how much money I need?" That's a really common question, and it's because the book Watchmaking doesn't necessarily tell you every single thing you have to buy. In fact, it tells you very minimal. It says you'll need hand tools, you'll need things like files, things like saws, you'll need a watchmaker's lathe with a milling attachment. And for the uninitiated, what are those things? It's all well and good to say a file, but it's like, okay, what sort of a file? How many files? Ask any watchmaker
Yeah.
worth his salt, and they've got 100 to 200 files. It's not a file. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, investment in tools. And for a third thing would be, the watch is not you. It may be a reflection or a shadow of you, but it's not you. And it's okay, like when you stuff it up, or when it's not good enough, or you look at the watch and you look at someone else's and you think mine's not good enough, or this, that, the other. It's not you. It's a representation of you in a moment in time, and it's not. It doesn't define you as a person. Because that was something that I certainly struggled with for the first year or so, and that was when the watch wasn't ticking, when it's just this thing that's in the works, or when I would have a moment where I couldn't progress for quite some time. I would get really in my head and think, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be. I can't do this. It's impossible, or whatever. And well, at the end of the day, it's just taking a step back and realizing the watch isn't you. It's just a representation of the journey.
That's great.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Just one final question, sort of in a similar theme. Obviously, when you're unwell, you're doing a lot of reading. You had a lot of time to kind of sit and reflect, and watchmaking was one of the things that you came across. Was there anything else that you were reading or kind of consuming or thinking about at the time that potentially informed the decision to kind of move towards watchmaking, as opposed to your mate giving you a book on cars or on music or art, painting or whatever it might be? Was there something else that you were reading that you kind of primed you to then receive a book about watchmaking and think this is it?
That's an interesting question. I I have a deep interest in philosophy, and uh, I like things like the history and origins of consciousness. I like the exploration of the human conscious experience. I really, really enjoy reading the great philosophers, throughout the centuries. It's this journey of progression and moving forward and discovery. I just enjoy the exploration of how people interpreted the conscious experience, what it is to be human. And at a similar time, I was a time when I met my partner Cielo, and we just, for the first couple of years of our relationship, we didn't have a television or anything. We didn't watch movies, nothing. We just talked, and we both sort of shared this passion for just sort of trying to figure out what the hell this is. And so I think that conversations with her definitely was certainly a large contributing factor to my decision to, shall we say, sacrifice my life journey to watchmaking.
Fantastic.
Well, hopefully not sacrifice, dedicate.
Exactly. There's a better word there. There's a better word there.
Yeah. So, Reuben, listening to your story, like, it's a fantastic, captivating story, and actually following from the origins all the way through to what you're doing now is super exciting. And I bet there'll be people listening going, what's the best way to get in touch if they want to work with you on a commission or kind of follow your journey further? What's the best way for collectors to get in touch?
Yeah, certainly. The best medium for me, where I'm most active and reading, is Instagram. So my Instagram is my name, Reuben Schoots. You can also contact me via email, which you can get on my Instagram account. That'd be the best place to begin that conversation.
And you're ready to do you think now would be a good time? Like, you're ready to start working with people on projects and things like that into the future? Like, now's the time to go?
Yeah, most certainly. I'm been talking with various collectors and connoisseurs alike, and I very much welcome anyone who's interested in owning a true one man, one watch piece of horology. I would like to get to know those people specifically, and for me, it's about finding really the right person to buy the watch.
Yeah, fantastic. And hearing your story, like, I'm just so excited that there's a talented independent watchmaker like a young independent watchmaker working in Australia. Like, how exciting is that?
Yeah, that's the real goal. One of my main career goals is just to put Australia on the horological map in a serious way.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. Now, look, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. Before we go, one of the things we do sort of like to do here in Fifth Wrist is ask our guests and ourselves for some recommendations, cultural, Instagram or otherwise, just to help us sort of grow and learn more. I might throw to Nick, actually, see if he's got anything up his sleeve.
I had one Instagram account who I recently started following, ABV33, who is a collector of just the most weird and wonderful parts of the watchmaking world. I think normally, you can tell if within, maybe the first 20 or 30 photos they've got some pictures of some beautiful pocket watches. That's generally a pretty good sign that they're on the right track. And yeah, the gentleman's name is Adam Victor. Only got about 3,000 followers, but I really don't understand how, because some of the most interesting watches, in terms of subject matter, but also just fantastic captions that kind of offer a really good insight into what they are, and not just watches. Like he's got a fairly detailed history of a plate that he owns, which was by a master enameler that also did watch dials for Patek. And Vacheron. So yeah, just a kind of range of really, really interesting things. So ABV33.
Yeah, it's a great account. That's really cool. I love that.
I'll most definitely be checking that out.
What about you, Reuben?
Recommendations. I've got three here, if that's allowed.
Well, only to a special guest.
I've got the first one here is the Dean DK. I'm sure you guys have probably heard of Dean. He's got a great YouTube channel, and Dean's a really lovely guy, and he's on a similar journey to myself. He's on his path to becoming an independent watchmaker. So I'd like to give a shout out to him. He's got a great story, and I think he's worth a follow. Another one is a friend of mine, Three Hands Studio. I'm not sure if you guys have seen, possibly have.
No.
He's an exceptionally talented maker. He's sort of got, he's a watchmaker first and foremost, but he's got really a real mixed bag of skills, and he actually puts watch movements into cameras, and cameras that he's made himself, and uses the watch movement as the shutter release timer.
Wow.
And he makes all sorts of automata, like galloping horses, flying unicorns, clockwork automata. So he's well worth a follow, and he's genuinely
Oh,
just
wow.
a humble craftsman who he clearly just loves making, and he's not. It's humility is probably the word for that account, and also amazing skill. And he's been someone that's been very supportive of my work since pretty well day one of me opening my social media accounts. He has been supportive, and I think the world needs to see his work. It's really spectacular. My third recommendation is a gentleman by the name of Tommy Jobson. Tommy's, Tommy.
Oh, yes.
Um,
Yeah, future guest on this podcast. Got him locked in and ready. He can't say no
Good,
now because we've got it on tape.
No, Tommy and I have only talked briefly, but we both follow each other's work, and I know he follows my work closely, and as do I his. Are you both familiar with the Astro skeleton clock that's being built in Mossvale?
Is that the
No, I'm
Buchanan
not.
clocks?
The Buchanan clocks, yes.
Yeah, Buchanan clocks. Yeah. Unbelievable stuff.
So I
Yeah.
was fortunate enough. I've been out there to see that clock and the workshop, and actually Lindsay, my mentor, he actually built a lot of the machinery for those guys. And it's Nick. If you don't know, you must look at this clock. It's the most complicated clock that's ever been constructed. It's got 52 complications, and tells the time on Mars. It's got all the moons on Mars. It's got Saturn's moons. It's got the entire solar system with including moons, sunrise, sunset, the tide. The lot. It's got the works. It's the most unbelievable clock.
I think I might have seen that on your Instagram potentially, Reuben. It
Yeah.
looks like it's about to start walking off.
Yeah, it sort of starts talking and then just flies off.
Yeah.
That's the one. So the maker, Derek Noakes of Buchanan Clocks, he previously made I won't say replica because it's not a replica. He made an improved version of Breguet's double pendulum clock that Breguet made for that Queen Elizabeth has.
Mm.
It's a spectacular clock, and Tommy actually did a restoration on it. So that's a testament to his skill and his craft as a clock repairer. That's as good as it gets. That's the best clocks in the world. There's nothing even comes close to the Buchanan clocks, and they're right here in Australia, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'd like to send people to Tommy Jobson. That's TOMMY Jobson, JOBSON.
That's very cool. I love these sort of echoes because we've been doing this Fifth Wrist podcast for a little while now. So we spoke with David Walter, watch and clockmaker, a couple of weeks back, and he mentioned that that I think we might have talked about that very same double pendulum clock.
Oh wow!
That Breguet made, because there was a bit of a question mark. Maybe it was made by Auntie Janvier for Breguet because Breguet bought Janvier's workshop. Anyway, it's these little resonances. Just once again, horological pun here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, lovely. It's really, really cool. There you go. But Tommy's a great guy. Yeah, Tommy's a champion. So we'll get him on for sure.
look forward to the episode with him. I think we can all agree that Breguet didn't make many of the things with Breguet's name on them. That's evident in the sheer number of watches.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the genius of Breguet was the design and the organization of having workshops across Europe that they could service Breguet watches at a time where, you couldn't just send your clock all the way back to France. So yeah, he was a talented watchmaker, but I think his real genius and gift to posterity was the design, all the little features, the hands, the coin edging, the dials and all of that. But also it's that, having skilled workmen across Europe and, being able to promote himself to the courts of various countries. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Absolutely. A phenomenal human. There's no doubt.
And I'm sure there's probably, like, I can hear the rage of people who are just writing angry DMs to us right now going, how dare you? Breguet was a genius. He made everything by hand.
He was a genius.
Yeah. I'm just preempting hate mail. That's all. That's fine. Just write in anytime.
That's true.
Right, at the Watch Regulator. That's the account to send hate mail to. Very, very cool. Well, I'll do mine, which is an account called at Watch Speak Easy. Watch Speak Easy. So it's an account with really cool watches, but also sort of really great macro shots. And once again, the ability to take good pictures of watches is not a skill I have. So I'm always sort of, impressed by people who do, cool shots of really, really interesting pieces. And this account has some nice Grand Seikos, which I know, Nick, you're a fan of. But yes, the whole heap of sort of cool stuff.
Absolutely.
Yes,
it looks like there's a few two coronets maybe for your taste, Roman.
that's right. I just, I get blindness. I get coronet blindness. It's a bit like, people can't recognize faces. You get prosopagnosia. I get Rolex pagnosia. I just don't recognize it. It just doesn't scan across the retina. It's fine.
The QR code.
That's fine. Exactly. Very, very cool. Well, look, Reuben, such a pleasure to talk to you and learn more about you, about your journey, and just kind of hearing the passion and the commitment in your voice. It's just been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Inspiring.
Big time.
Well, thank you both very much. It's been a real pleasure to get some of the story off my chest and out into the air, and it's been a great conversation.
Cool. Thanks for joining us. And so the last thing we always say is, we started Fifth Wrist as a platform by enthusiasts and for enthusiasts. So if you wanted to join us, contribute, write reviews, or come on the podcast, please get in touch. Follow Fifth Wrist on Facebook and Instagram, or on our website at fifthwrist.com. Like and subscribe, all that. Leave a review. We do like reviews, positive or negative. We learn from the feedback. Follow me. I'm at Times Roman AU. My co-host Nick is at nick.kenyon. And our guest Reuben Schoots is at Reuben Schoots. Pretty easy to remember. Thanks for joining us today, and stay on time.